I'm officially gifting this beautiful ranch lake to my fiancé, my HOA, president neighbor. Patricia announced at her engagement party. The only problem was, she was gifting my private lake on my property. When I showed up to stop this unbelievable act, she had security throw me out as if I were a trespasser on my own land. The next morning, at 6 a.m., the police were at my door because she had falsely claimed I threatened her. This entitled woman truly believed she could steal my family's 50-year-old ranch lake in broad daylight, but her greed set off a chain of events, including a $3 million lawsuit that ended in ways no one could have ever predicted. Let me take you back to where this madness began. It was a warm Saturday evening in June, and the sounds of clinking glasses and laughter drifted over from my neighbor's yard, a sound that would soon change everything. I was sitting on my grandfather's old wooden bench by the lake, peacefully watching the koi fish swim in lazy circles, when the party noise from Patricia's backyard grew louder. She was throwing an engagement party, and it seemed like half the neighborhood had come to celebrate her upcoming marriage to Derek, a real estate developer who always looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. That lake has been in my family for 3 generations. It was passed down from my grandfather, who built the ranch with his own hands back in the 1970s. Every morning, I would feed the koi, some of them direct descendants of the original fish my grandfather had brought all the way from Japan. The water was crystal clear, fed by a natural spring and surrounded by beautiful willow trees that provided the perfect shade. On hot summer days, it wasn't just a body of water. It was a living piece of my family's history. It was a place where my grandfather taught me to fish, where my father proposed to my mother, and where countless family gatherings had taken place over the decades. As a landscape architect, I deeply understood the value of preserving natural beauty, and this lake was the crown jewel of our property. The irony wasn't lost on me that Patricia, as the HOA president for the past 3 years, had tried many times to find a way to claim community access to what she called the most beautiful water feature in the development. Suddenly, the party noise died down to a hush. I heard the unmistakable sound of Patricia's voice amplified through a microphone. Curiosity got the better of me, and I walked closer to the fence line to hear what she was announcing. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate our love," she began, her voice dripping with the fake sweetness she always reserved for public appearances. "As you know, in our wonderful HOA community, we believe in sharing and caring for each other. We're not just neighbors, we're family." The crowd murmured in approval, and I rolled my eyes at her performance. Patricia had perfected the art of playing the caring leader while, at the same time, issuing violation notices for grass that was a mere half-inch tall. But what she said next made my blood run cold. "And speaking of sharing," she continued, "I want to give Derek the most special engagement gift imaginable." She paused for dramatic effect, and I heard the rustling of papers. "If you look at this original HOA map from 1985, you'll see it clearly. States community lake access." My heart started pounding as I realized where this was going. The map she was referencing showed the public boat ramp on the other side of the development, not my private lake. But Patricia either didn't know the difference or was deliberately twisting the facts. "So tonight," she announced triumphantly, in front of all our dear friends and neighbors, "I'm officially gifting this beautiful lake to my future husband, Derek." The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. I heard the click of cameras and saw the bright flashes from phones through the gaps in the fence. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a calculated, public declaration designed to create the illusion that she had the right to do this. I didn't waste another second. I walked around to her gate and pushed through the crowd of party guests, my grandfather's property deed clutched tightly in my hand. "Excuse me," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. "That's my lake on my property, and you have no right to gift something you don't own." The crowd fell silent, and all eyes turned between Patricia and me like spectators at a tennis match. Patricia's smile never wavered, but I saw a glint of satisfaction in her eyes. She had been expecting this. "Oh, Marcus," she said into the microphone, her voice now taking on a concerned tone, "I think you're confused. This is a community asset, and as HOA president, I have every right to allocate community resources. I held up the deed. This legal document says otherwise. That lake has been private property for 50 years, and you know it. Derek stood beside her, looking extremely uncomfortable and repeatedly checking his phone, while Patricia's expression hardened. Security, she called out sharply. We have someone disrupting our celebration. Please remove this party crasher. Two large men in black shirts appeared from the crowd and moved toward me. This is ridiculous, I protested. You can't just claim someone else's property because you want to. But my words were drowned out by Patricia's voice, now back on the microphone. I'm so sorry. Everyone. Some people just can't stand to see others happy. The security guards grabbed my arms and started pushing me toward the gate. I struggled to keep my balance, trying to explain to the guests that this was all a misunderstanding and that Patricia was lying. But the music had started again, and most people had already turned their attention back to the party. As I was being forcibly escorted out, I stumbled over a garden hose and went down hard on the grass. The deed flying from my hand, I heard someone gasp as cameras flashed, and the distinct sound of a phone video recording began. He's attacking. U.S., Patricia shouted, even though I was clearly the one on the ground. Someone call the police. The security guards hauled me to my feet and shoved me through the gate, slamming it shut behind me. Through the fence, I could hear Patricia addressing her guests again. I'm so sorry you had to witness that. Some neighbors just can't handle change. But don't worry. Derek's lake will be the most beautiful addition to our community. The crowd cheered once more, and I just stood there, grass stains on my clothes, with fury burning in my chest as I listened to them celebrate the theft of my family's legacy. Within 3 hours, the video was everywhere. The title Jealous Neighbor Ruins Engagement Party had already hit 500,000 views, with comments pouring in calling me entitled, selfish, and worse. The video, of course, had been carefully edited, starting right when I was already arguing, making it look like I had burst in unprovoked to cause trouble. But something interesting was happening in the comments section. Among all the negative reactions, a few observant viewers were asking the important questions. Wait, did she say she's gifting someone else's lake? One commenter wrote, how can you gift something you don't own? Another added, did anyone else notice how the security was already in position? This seems staged. I sat at my computer, taking screenshots of these comments before they could be deleted, building my evidence file. Patricia might have won this round in the court of public opinion, but I knew the real battle was just beginning. As I closed my laptop, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let this slide. Patricia had publicly humiliated me, tried to steal my property, and turned me into a viral villain. But in doing so, she had made a crucial mistake. She had done it all on camera, in front of 50 witnesses, with her own words condemning her. The next day, I called Gerald, my grandfather's old friend and the best property lawyer in the state. Patricia wanted to play games with property law, and that was fine. But she was about to learn that some games have very expensive consequences. The sound of an authoritative knock at 6 o'clock in the morning is never a good sign, especially when it comes just 12 hours after your neighbor publicly announced she was stealing your lake. I stumbled out of bed, threw on a robe, and opened the door to find the police officers standing on my porch, with Patricia lurking behind them like a vulture waiting for roadkill. Mr. Marcus, the lead officer asked, his hand resting casually on his belt. We received a complaint about threats made at a private event last night. Mind if we ask you a few questions? Asked her as Patricia stepped forward, her face a mask of concern. That would have been convincing if I hadn't seen her practicing it in the mirror through her bathroom window earlier. Officer, I'm terrified, she said, clutching her chest dramatically. He burst into my engagement party and threatened to destroy everything I love. I have 50 witnesses. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that losing my temper would only make things worse. Officers, there's been a huge misunderstanding, I explained calmly. Ms. Morrison here announced at her party that she was gifting my private lake to her fiancé. I simply came to clarify that she doesn't own it. The officers exchanged glances, and the younger one pulled out a notepad. Ma'am, is this true? Did you claim ownership of his property? Asterisk. Patricia's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly before she recovered. The HOA bylaws clearly state that all community waterfront areas are under HOA jurisdiction. She lied. Section 47B specifically mentions community lake access. She pulled out a folder she had obviously prepared for this moment. See? It's right here in black and white. The lead officer studied the document, his brow furrowing. Ma'am, this section appears to be referring to the public boat ramp on Elm Street, not private property. Do you have any documentation showing ownership of Mr. Marcus's lake? The silence that followed was delicious. Patricia's face went through several shades of red before she sputtered. Well, that's obviously outdated paperwork. The spirit of the law clearly indicates shared community resources. Asterisk. I couldn't help but smile. Officers, I have the deed to my property right here. Passed down through 3 generations. The lake has been private property since my grandfather built it in 1972. The younger officer looked at the deed, then at Patricia. Ma'am, this is clearly a civil matter, not a criminal one. And making false claims about property ownership to law enforcement is a serious issue. Patricia's carefully constructed facade began to crack, but he threatened me. Everyone saw him. Get violent. The lead officer turned to me. Sir, did you threaten Ms. Morrison? I shook my head. I told her she couldn't gift property she didn't own. If that's a threat, then every property law textbook in America is making threats. The younger officer actually snorted, quickly covering it with a cough. Patricia's face darkened. This isn't over, she hissed, but the officers were already walking back to their patrol car. Ma'am, the lead officer called over his shoulder. I suggest you consult with a real estate attorney before making any more public claims about property ownership. Have a nice day. As their car pulled away, Patricia stood on my lawn, shaking with rage. You think you've won? She spat. I've been president of this HOA for 3 years. I know every loophole, every technicality. That lake will be Derek's wedding present, whether you like it or not. She stormed off, and I thought that would be the end of it for the day. How wrong I was. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, I heard the rumble of heavy machinery and looked out to see a flatbed truck pulling up to the property line. Workers began unloading massive posts and what looked like the components of a billboard. Patricia stood there directing traffic, live streaming the entire operation to her followers. Hi, everyone. Patricia here with an exciting update on the Derek's Lake Resort project. She chirped at her phone. As you can see, we're making it official with proper signage. This beautiful lakefront property will soon be transformed into a community treasure with a spa, marina, and wedding venue. I watched in disbelief as they erected a 20-foot billboard that read, Future Site, Derek's Lake Resort and Spa, complete with an artist's rendering of my lake surrounded by commercial development. The sign was technically on her property, but the arrow pointed directly at my lake, and the rendering clearly showed my shoreline. Derek stood off to the side during all this, and I noticed something odd about his behavior. While Patricia performed for her camera, he kept checking his phone with increasing anxiety, occasionally wiping sweat from his forehead despite the mild temperature. When Patricia called him over to pose by the sign, he forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes and immediately went back to his phone. Something was bothering him, and it wasn't just the illegal nature of Patricia's scheme. As the workers finished installing the sign, I heard Patricia tell her viewers, some people might try to stand in the way of progress, but love conquers all. Derek and I are building a future together, and no bitter neighbor can stop that. The live stream had 10,000 viewers, and the comments were pouring in. Some supported her vision of community development, while others questioned the legality of claiming someone else's property. But Patricia didn't care about legality. She cared about perception. As she was winning the PR war, I picked up my phone and sent a text to Gerald. Need to meet ASAP. Neighbor is escalating. She's got cops involved and is now advertising commercial development of my property. His response came quickly. Can you come to my office in an hour? And Marcus, start documenting everything, every interaction, every false claim, every witness. We're going to need it all. As I gathered my documents, I noticed something interesting in the HOA paperwork Patricia had shown the police. The election records from 3 years ago, when she became president, showed an unusually high turnout and unanimous support from addresses that I knew had been vacant at the time. Gerald, I texted again. I think we need to look deeper into how Patricia became HOA president. Something's not right with these election records. His response made me smile for the first time. All day. Already on it. Did some digging after your call last night? You're not going to believe what I found. Patricia Morrison has been playing a much longer game than you realized. Looking out at the massive billboard announcing the theft of my property, I realized this wasn't just about a lake anymore. This was about corruption, fraud, and a woman who thought her position gave her the power to take whatever she wanted. Gerald's law office hadn't changed much since my grandfather first brought me there as a kid. The same leather-bound books lined the walls, and the faint smell of pipe tobacco seemed permanently embedded in the furniture. But the document he slid across his mahogany desk to me was definitely new and definitely explosive. Marcus, your instinct about the election records was dead on, he said, adjusting his reading glasses. I had my investigator pull the original HOA election documents from 3 years ago. Look at these signatures. He spread out several pages, pointing to name after name. See these 30 addresses? They were all vacant properties at the time of the election bank foreclosures. Houses in probate, even a lot that never had a house built on it. Yet, somehow, they all voted for Patricia. I studied the signatures, noticing they all had suspiciously similar handwriting, despite being from different voters. She forged them, I said, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. She stole the election to become HOA president. Gerald nodded grimly. That's not all. Remember that community lake access clause she keeps citing? I pulled the original HOA charter from 1985. That clause specifically refers to the public boat ramp at the Elm Street entrance, which is a quarter-mile from your property. She's deliberately misrepresenting the documents. Can we prove all this? In court, I asked, feeling hope surge through me for the first time since the party started. Gerald's smile was the kind that probably terrified opposing lawyers. We can do better than that. Forging signatures on official HOA documents is fraud. Misrepresenting property boundaries for personal gain is attempted theft. And doing it all publicly while serving in an elected position, that's corruption of office. We're not just going to stop her, Marcus. We're going to expose her completely. He pulled out another folder. I've prepared 3 documents. First, an emergency restraining order preventing her or her fiancé from coming within 500 feet of your property. Second, a cease and desist for the billboard and any marketing materials referencing your lake. And third, a formal complaint to the HOA board demanding an investigation into election fraud. I signed where he indicated, feeling like I was finally fighting back instead of just defending myself. When will these be served? I asked. Gerald's grin widened. That's the beautiful part. My investigator tells me Patricia is hosting a live-stream meeting with potential investors for her resort this afternoon. Public service of legal documents is completely legal and in this case, rather poetic. 3 hours later, I was back, home, watching Patricia's live stream on my laptop. She had set up in her home office with a professional backdrop showing the resort plans. Welcome, everyone, to this exclusive investor presentation for Derek's Lake Resort and Spa, she gushed at the camera. We already have 5 premium investors from Dubai, very interested in our waterfront development opportunity. She clicked through slides showing architectural renderings of my family's lake transformed into a commercial playground with jet ski rentals, a floating restaurant, and even a wedding venue on the shore where my grandfather's bench once sat. The location is absolutely perfect, she continued, with existing mature landscaping and pristine water quality maintained for generations. The irony of her using my family's careful stewardship as a selling point wasn't lost on me. Derek sat beside her, and I noticed he kept glancing off camera nervously, just as Patricia was drawing a diagram of the planned marina, showing how they would dredge my lake to accommodate larger boats. There was a knock at her door. One moment. Everyone, she said to the camera, her smile faltering slightly. Derek, could you? But Derek seemed frozen in place. The knocking came again, more insistent. Patricia maintained her composure as she went to answer it, but she made the mistake of leaving the live stream running. The entire audience, including me, watched as Sheriff Davidson appeared in the doorway, holding a stack of legal documents. "Patricia Morrison," he said in his official voice, "I have court documents that need to be served to you personally." The chat exploded with comments as Patricia's face went white. "This is highly inappropriate," she hissed, trying to block the camera's view. "I'm in the middle of a business meeting." Sheriff Davidson was unmoved. "Ma'am, you're being served with an emergency restraining order requiring you to stay 500 feet away from the property belonging to Marcus Thompson. You're also being served with a cease and desist order regarding false advertising of said property and a notice of a formal complaint filed with the HOA board regarding election fraud." The investor chat was going wild. "Is this a scam?" one person typed. "Fraud," wrote another. "Pulling out immediately," declared someone with a Dubai flag emoji. Patricia tried to salvage the situation, plastering on her fake smile as she returned to the camera. "I'm so sorry for that interruption, everyone. Just a minor misunderstanding that our legal team will clear up quickly." But the damage was done. The investors were dropping out of the call one by one, and someone in the chat had already screen-capped Sheriff Davidson serving the papers. Within minutes, clips were being shared across social media with captions like, "HOA President Busted During Investor Call" and "Lake Resort Scam Exposed Live." Derek finally spoke, his voice shaky. "Patricia, maybe we should postpone this meeting." She turned on him with a look that could have curdled milk. "We're not postponing anything. This is just a temporary setback." But Derek was already closing his laptop, and I noticed him quickly gathering papers from the desk. Papers Patricia tried to grab from him. "What are you doing?" she snapped. "Those are confidential." Derek pulled the papers away from her reach. "I need to review everything with my own lawyer," he said. "This is getting too complicated." After the live stream ended in disaster, I thought Patricia might finally back down. But I had underestimated her determination and overestimated her wisdom. That evening, as I sat by the lake enjoying the peace, my phone buzzed with a text from a neighbor. "Check Patricia's social media. She's not giving up." Sure enough, Patricia had posted a defiant message. "Some people think they can use intimidation tactics to stop progress, but I've been fighting for this community for 3 years, and I won't be silenced by frivolous lawsuits." Derek's Lake will happen one way or another. Stay tuned for a major announcement tomorrow. The comments were split between supporters who believed her victim narrative and skeptics who had seen the serving video. But one comment caught my eye. From someone who claimed to be a former HOA board member. "Patricia always talked about that lake. She said her ex-husband's family tried to buy it decades ago and failed. This seems personal." I took a screenshot of everything, adding it to my growing evidence file. Gerald called me that evening with an update. The HOA board has agreed to an emergency meeting to review the election fraud allegations. Also, Patricia's lawyer contacted me. They want to negotiate. I laughed bitterly. Negotiate? She announced she's stealing my property to an audience of thousands. What's there to negotiate? Gerald's voice was serious. "Marcus, I've seen people like Patricia before. When cornered, they get desperate, and desperate people do dangerous things. Make sure your security cameras are working and recording everything. And whatever you do, don't let her provoke you into doing something that could hurt our case." As I hung up, I noticed the lights on at Patricia's house, despite the late hour. Through the window, I could see her on the phone, pacing and gesticulating wildly. At one point, she threw something it looked like a picture frame against the wall. Derek was nowhere to be seen. Round midnight, just as I was heading to bed, I heard a vehicle pull up to Patricia's house, peeking through my blinds. I saw her loading equipment into a truck, tarps, tools, and what looked like sandbags. She was on her phone again, and I caught a few words carried on the night breeze. "Tonight. Bring everything." "No, he won't know until morning." A chill ran down my spine as I realized what she might be planning. I immediately checked my security cameras, making sure they were all recording, and sent Gerald a text. "I think Patricia is about to do something really stupid. Cameras are rolling." His response was immediate. Don't confront her. Let her hang herself. Document everything. As I watched Patricia's truck disappear into the darkness, I wondered just how far she was willing to go to steal what was never hers to take. The sound of dying fish, gasping for oxygen, is something you never forget, especially when those fish represent 3 generations of careful breeding and family memories. I discovered Patricia's handiwork at sunrise when I went out for my morning ritual of feeding the koi. The lake level had dropped by 60% overnight, leaving the beautiful lotus plants my grandmother had cultivated stranded on muddy banks, and dozens of prized koi fish flopping desperately in the shallows. My hands shook as I surveyed the devastation, the full weight of what Patricia had done hitting me like a physical blow. These weren't just fish. They were living connections to my grandfather, some of them 50 years old and worth thousands of dollars each. The ancient gold and white koi my grandfather had named Sunshine lay still in the mud, her massive body no longer having enough water to breathe. I dropped to my knees, trying desperately to save W. Had I could, scooping up smaller fish and carrying them to the deeper, remaining water. But it was like trying to bail out the Titanic with a teacup. My security cameras had captured everything in crystal clear night vision. At 2 o'clock in the morning, Derek's truck had pulled up to the public utility easement where the creek fed into my lake. He'd worked for 2 hours, using sandbags and wooden planks to create a dam that diverted the water flow away from my property. What made it worse was how nervous he looked in the footage, constantly checking over his shoulder, stopping several times as if reconsidering, but always returning to his grim task after what were clearly phone calls from Patricia. The environmental destruction was staggering, not just the fish, but the entire ecosystem my family had nurtured for half a century. Herons that usually hunted along the shores circled confused overhead. The beaver family that had built a lodge on the north shore had abandoned their home. Frogs and turtles struggled in the remaining puddles. It wasn't just property damage. It was ecological vandalism. I documented everything with my phone, creating a video that would later go viral with the title, 3 Generations of Koi, Descendants of My Grandfather's Original Fish from Japan, Gone in One Night. This is what happens when greed and entitlement meet environmental crime. I uploaded the video with shaking hands, tagging it with hashtag #SaveMarcusKOI and hashtag environmental crime. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within an hour, it had 50,000 views and was climbing. Comments poured in from horrified fish enthusiasts, environmentalists, and people who just couldn't believe someone would do something so cruel. This is heartbreaking. One commenter wrote, "Those koi were living artwork." Another added, "Whoever did this should be in federal prison. Destroying an ecosystem is a serious crime." Local news picked up the story by noon, and suddenly my phone was ringing non-stop with interview requests. But the most important call came from Gerald. "Marcus, I've just filed a $3 million lawsuit against Patricia and Derek for property damage, environmental destruction, emotional distress, and punitive damages. But that's not all. I've also contacted the EPA. Deliberately damming a waterway affects federal jurisdiction. This isn't just a civil matter anymore, it's criminal." The lawsuit documentation was comprehensive. Gerald had calculated not just the value of the dead fish, some worth $10,000 each, but the cost of ecosystem restoration, the generational value of irreplaceable breeding stock, and the emotional trauma of watching family heritage be destroyed. As if the morning couldn't get any worse, around noon, I noticed Patricia posting her own video response. She stood in front of my dying lake, wearing what she probably thought looked like concerned citizen attire, claiming she had discovered the ecological disaster, and suggesting that I had done it myself for insurance money. "It's suspicious," she said to her camera, that right after being served legal papers, Marcus would destroy his own property to gain sympathy and money. But Patricia had made a crucial mistake. Sharp-eyed viewers immediately noticed she was wearing the same clothes from her midnight equipment loading adventure, just with a different jacket thrown on top. The comment section turned into a detective forum, with people comparing screenshots and timestamps, proving she had filmed her discovery video before I had even found the damage. The hashtag Patricia the Liar started trending locally, And her attempted frame job backfired spectacularly. Even better, someone found traffic camera footage of Derek's truck on the route to the utility easement. At exactly the time my security cameras showed him there, the digital breadcrumb trail was undeniable. By late afternoon, the environmental impact became even clearer. The State Fish and Wildlife Department arrived to assess the damage, and their preliminary report was damning. This is one of the worst cases of deliberate ecosystem destruction we've seen. The lead inspector told me those koi weren't just pets, they were a managed population with genetic diversity that took decades to establish. Some of these bloodlines are now extinct. He took water samples and photographed everything, building a case that would support federal charges. The 2 million view count on my video had also attracted attention from environmental lawyers, offering pro bono assistance, and fish breeding associations offering to help rebuild the population. But nothing could bring back Sunshine and the others. As Patricia's frame job video got ratioed into oblivion, with fact checkers tearing apart her timeline, I noticed Derek hadn't appeared in any of her content. His truck was gone from their driveway, and when a reporter knocked on their door for comment, Patricia answered alone, claiming Derek was traveling for business. Derek's car had returned to their driveway, but I hadn't seen him at all. Their curtains stayed drawn, and the only activity was Patricia's occasional surveillance of my property. I mentioned it to Gerald during our morning call, and he reminded me again to stay calm, no matter what happened. She's trying to provoke you, Marcus. Don't give her any ammunition for a countersuit. But Patricia wasn't planning to provoke me directly. She was far too clever for that. Instead, she had choreographed an elaborate performance designed to destroy my credibility and turn me into the villain of this story. The trap was sprung on a Thursday evening, just as the sun was setting and casting long shadows across the property. I was inside, reviewing restoration quotes for the lake, when movement caught my eye through the living room window. Someone was at my grandfather's bench, the hand-carved wooden bench he had built for my grandmother 50 years ago, positioned at the perfect spot to watch the sunset over the water. But this bench sat just outside my property line, on the strip of public easement between my land and the lake access path. Derek was there with a sledgehammer, and he was destroying it. Piece by piece, the sound of splintering wood cut through me like a physical pain. This wasn't just vandalism, it was the desecration of a family shrine. That bench was where my grandfather had taught me about patience and nature, where my father had sat with me after my mother's funeral, and where 3 generations of my family had found peace and solace, and Derek was methodically reducing it to kindling, while Patricia filmed from an angle that would capture me, but not show what Derek was actually doing. I knew it was a trap. Every logical part of my brain screamed at me to stay inside, to let the security cameras record everything, and to handle this through proper channels. But logic fails when you watch someone destroy the physical manifestation of your family's love and legacy. I burst through the door and ran toward the bench, my vision blurred with rage and grief. "Get away from there," I shouted, my voice cracking with emotion. My grandfather built that with his own hands. It's been there for 50 years. Derek looked up at me with practiced fear, dropping the sledgehammer and stumbling backward dramatically. "Help," he cried out, even though I was still 20 feet away. "He's attacking me. Patricia, call 911. That's when Patricia emerged from her hidden position, her phone already recording, capturing what would look like me charging aggressively at a cowering Derek. "Stop right there, Marcus," she shouted. "I'm recording everything. You're assaulting my fiancé." The sick brilliance of their plan became clear even through my anger. They had chosen the one thing I couldn't watch being destroyed, positioned it perfectly outside my property where I had no legal protection, and created a scenario where my justified outrage would look like unprovoked aggression. I reached Derek just as he fell backward, and in my desperate attempt to save what was left of the bench, I pushed him away from it. It wasn't violent, just a firm shove to get him away from my grandfather's handiwork. But on camera, from Patricia's carefully chosen angle, it would look like assault. Derek played his part perfectly, crying out and falling dramatically to the ground, clutching his arm as if I'd broken it. "My arm," he wailed. "I think it's broken, Patricia." He's gone crazy." Patricia ran toward us, her camera still rolling, narrating for her audience. "Oh my God, Marcus just attacked Derek. We were just walking by, and he came out of nowhere. Someone call the police. This man is dangerous." The remains of my grandfather's bench lay scattered around us, 50 years of memories reduced to splinters, and I knew I had just handed Patricia exactly what she wanted. More neighbors appeared, drawn by the commotion, and all they saw was Derek on the ground, Patricia filming and crying, and me standing over them both with my fists clenched. "He destroyed my grandfather's bench," I tried to explain, but Patricia was already controlling the narrative. "He's been harassing us ever since we announced our engagement. First the party, now this. We're not safe in our own neighborhood." She had learned from her previous failure. This time, she went live immediately, streaming to thousands of viewers who saw only what she wanted them to see. The comments were already pouring in. "Call the cops. That man is unhinged." And poor Patricia and Derek, within minutes. The video had been shared hundreds of times with captions like "Crazy neighbor attacks couple live" and "HOA president assaulted by bitter neighbor." I stood there breathing heavily, looking at the destroyed bench and knowing I had just walked into Patricia's trap. With my eyes wide open, the wooden nameplate my grandfather had carved for my beloved Rose lay cracked in half at my feet. I picked it up gently, cradling the broken pieces, and that's when Patricia made sure to zoom in on my face, capturing what probably looked like guilty realization, but was actually the dawning horror of what I had just lost, not just the bench, but potentially my entire case against her. Gerald's call came within 10 minutes. "Marcus, please tell me you didn't touch him." His voice was heavy with disappointment. "She destroyed my grandfather's bench," I said quietly, still holding the broken nameplate. "It was all he had left of my grandmother." Gerald sighed deeply. "I understand, I really do, but you just gave her exactly what she needed. She's already filed for an emergency restraining order against you and submitted the video as evidence to dismiss your lawsuit. The judge will have to consider it." He paused, then added the words that chilled me to the bone. "Marcus, you might have just lost everything." As sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer, I looked at Patricia's triumphant face and Derek's performance of pain, and I realized that sometimes the cost of defending what you love is losing the war itself. The trap had been perfectly set and flawlessly executed, and I had walked right into it, driven by love, fury, and the unbearable pain of watching my history being erased, blow by blow. Patricia had won this round, and we both knew it. The question now was whether anything could save me from the consequences of those 30 seconds of justified rage. The darkest hour of my life came at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 days after the bench incident, when my phone buzzed with an unknown number trying to call. I almost didn't answer. Reporters had been hounding me since Patricia's video went viral. But something made me pick up. What I heard on the other end would change everything. The call went to voicemail after 3 rings, and when I played it back, I heard Derek's voice, slurred with alcohol and thick with panic. "Mr. Yarrow? Is this the lawyer? I need help. I can't do this anymore." My last name is close enough to sound like that when drunk, and my number must have been right next to his lawyer's in his contacts. The app I'd installed after my previous neighbor dispute automatically recorded everything, and what came next was pure gold. "Listen, I know it's late, but I'm freaking out here. The FBI called about my Dubai project. They know about the money laundering. I can't go to prison for Patricia's schemes." He hiccuped, then continued, his words tumbling out in a desperate rush. "It was all her, the whole thing. She made me block that lake, made me destroy the old man's bench. She drew diagrams, for God's sake, showed me exactly where to stand, so the cameras wouldn't catch what I was really doing." There was a pause filled with the sound of liquid pouring. Then Derek's voice returned, even more agitated. "She's been stealing from the HOA for 3 years. $500,000, maybe more. She needed that lake development to cover the missing money before the audit next month and the election. She didn't just forge a few signatures. She created an entire fake voter roll, dead people, empty houses, even made up names. She showed me the spreadsheets, proud of how clever she was. 'Nobody questions the president,' she said. 'They just pay their fees and mind their business.' The recording continued for another 5 minutes. Derek's confessions pouring out like water through a broken dam. He talked about Patricia's obsession with my lake, how she'd spent hours studying property law, looking for loopholes, and how she'd practiced her engagement party speech a dozen times to get the wording just right. He said her ex-husband's father had tried to buy that property in the 80s, and the owner had refused, and she called it unfinished family business. It's sick, man. She's sick, and I'm done. I'm not going to federal prison for her grudges. I have the receipts, the diagram she drew, even recordings of her coaching me. If I'm going down, I'm taking her with me. I just need immunity. Can you get me immunity? The message ended with Derek actually crying and hanging up. I sat in my dark living room, playing it again and again, hardly believing what I had just heard. This wasn't just evidence. It was a complete confession that blew Patricia's entire scheme wide open. I immediately forwarded it to Gerald with shaking hands. His response, despite the late hour, was instant. Do not delete this. Do not share it with anyone else. This changes everything. See you in court at 9 o'clock sharp. The emergency hearing had been scheduled to consider Patricia's restraining order against me and her motion to dismiss my lawsuit. She walked in that morning like she'd already won, wearing her best power suit and carrying a folder thick with what she probably thought was damning evidence. Derek sat beside her, but I noticed they didn't make eye contact. He looked haggard, constantly checking his phone, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool courtroom. Patricia's lawyer opened strong, playing her edited video of me attacking Derek, emphasizing my pattern of aggressive behavior and the clear danger I posed to his clients. The judge watched, stone-faced, occasionally making notes, and I felt my heart sinking. Even knowing about Derek's confession, watching that video made me look unhinged. Then Gerald stood up. Your Honor, before we proceed, I need to present new evidence that came to light last night, evidence that completely recontextualizes the events in question. Patricia's lawyer objected immediately, but the judge overruled him. If this evidence is relevant to the claims being made, I'll hear it. Gerald connected his laptop to the courtroom's audio system. Your Honor, what you're about to hear is a voicemail left by Mr. Derek Williams at 2:07 this morning. The defendant called my client by mistake, believing he was calling his attorney. As Derek's drunken voice filled the courtroom, his face went white. Patricia turned to stare at him in horror, then fury. As his confession played out for everyone to hear, it was all her, the whole thing. When he got to the part about the HOA theft, several board members in the gallery gasped. The court reporter's fingers flew over her keys, capturing every damning word. The mention of the FBI investigation into Derek's Dubai dealings caused him to physically shrink in his seat. But the most dramatic moment came when Derek's recorded voice described the bench destruction plot. She drew diagrams, for God's sake, showed me exactly where to stand so the cameras wouldn't catch what I was really doing. Patricia shot to her feet. Derek, you spineless coward, she screamed, her carefully maintained composure finally shattering completely. I saved your failing business. I gave you everything. Order. The judge banged his gavel. Ms. Morrison, sit down immediately, or I'll hold you in contempt. But Patricia was beyond reason. He's lying. He's a drunk and a failure. I never stole anything. The lake is mine. It should have been mine all along. Derek stood up too, moving away from her. I want a separate lawyer, Your Honor. I'll testify to everything: the HOA theft, the election, fraud, all of it. I have documents, her handwritten diagrams, even some recordings of our planning sessions. I just want a deal. I can't go to prison for her crimes. The judge looked between them, then at the evidence Gerald was presenting, screenshots of the forged signatures, the environmental damage report, and the financial discrepancies in the whole records that Patricia had hidden for years. I've heard. Enough, he said firmly. The motion for a restraining order against Mr. Thompson is denied. The motion to dismiss his lawsuit is denied. Furthermore, based on what I've heard today, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney for criminal investigation. He turned to Patricia, whose face had gone from red to ash gray. Ms. Morrison, I strongly suggest you obtain criminal defense counsel immediately. What happened next was like something out of a movie. to federal agents, who had apparently been waiting in the hallway, entered the courtroom. Patricia Morrison. One said, "Producing handcuffs, you're under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit environmental crimes. You have the right to remain silent." As they cuffed her right there in the courtroom, Patricia's defiance finally crumbled. She looked around wildly, seeing the HOA board members' disgusted faces, her neighbors recording with their phones, and Derek being escorted out by different agents. The empire she'd built on lies and theft was collapsing in real time, and everyone was watching. "This isn't over," she screamed as they led her away. "That lake belongs to my family. It was supposed to be ours, but it was over." The judge awarded me the full $3 million in damages, though I knew I'd be lucky to collect a fraction once the criminal cases were resolved. The HOA board voted unanimously to remove Patricia as president and began a forensic audit that would uncover even more theft than Derek had known about. The EPA restored the water flow to my lake, and with the help of donations from around the world, we began rebuilding the koi population. 1 month later, I sat on a new bench by the lake, built by a local woodworker who had seen the story and insisted on creating a replica of my grandfather's design for free. The water was clear again, with young koi swimming alongside the few survivors, and the ecosystem was slowly healing. Gerald sat beside me, watching the sunset paint the water gold. "Your grandfather would be proud," he said quietly. "You fought the right way, even when they fought dirty." I smiled, thinking of the letter I'd received from Derek, who was now cooperating with federal prosecutors. He had apologized, explaining how Patricia had manipulated him with promises of wealth while hiding her true motivations. He was facing his own charges, but his cooperation meant he'd avoid the worst of it. Patricia, on the other hand, was looking at 15 to 20 years for the combined federal and state charges. As for the lake, it was safe. The publicity had actually helped. The city council passed new ordinances protecting historical family properties from HOA overreach. My grandfather's legacy would remain intact for future generations. The war was over, and justice had prevailed, even if the victory came at a cost I never expected to pay.